Welcome to And It's Live, the podcast which dives deep into football's most iconic seasons, stories, and what ifs. If you love football, history, tactics, and nostalgia, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell, and drop us a like on YouTube so you don't miss an episode. Hello and welcome to the main event, the history of the Champions League. We are halfway through our look at 2012-2013 as we approach the end of a very enjoyable but very long history series. I'm joined by my two friends as always, Adam Thornton. How are we doing, Adam?
Good, thank you. Buzzing to get into a bit of gegenpressing.
Absolutely up your street, and I can just see the tally marks on your wall there as we come to the end. David Edgar's here as well. Davey, how are we on this fine summer's evening?
I'm very good, Martin, and very much looking forward to the greatest flash mob disaster in the history of sporting attempts at publicity. And that's one for next week, but one the listeners, I'm sure, will either remember fondly or enjoy when they hear about it.
Quite. Last 16 and the quarterfinals are for us this week. Where to start? We'll start with two huge ties in terms of names only, where a couple of these sides are actually in reality is a different story. Let's start with San Siro then, Adam. Milan, Barcelona. As I said, two massive names of European football, and a bit of a surprise that Milan took a 2-0 lead to Spain for that second leg. 2 second-half goals. Away goals still, of course, in operation at this time. Barcelona would turn it around. We'll talk about that in a moment. But how much of a shock was that first leg result?
I think it's a big shock. Yeah. I guess you just need to look at the lineups. I mean, Milan going with Kevin Prince Boateng, Gianpaolo Pazzini, and Stefan El-Shaarawy against Barcelona. I think it's a huge shock. That first one, I definitely didn't see it coming at all. I'm not going to go back through it again, but we've spoken about Milan and their downturn, given the decade before. The decade that comes is such a big contrast. And I think it was a surprise, I guess you could say. Big clubs have got that in them at times. I very much doubt it would be something that would happen now, 10 years later. But I think normal service is resumed by quite a big margin in the second leg. But yeah, a bit of a surprise to kick us off. Certainly Craig Thompson in the refereeing chair as well.
4-0 in Catalonia. David Messi getting things off and running, equaling that deficit before half time. And then David Villa and Jordi Alba to make sure. But yet again, Davey, it's one of these situations where a substantial lead. It's not that long ago where a 2-0 home first leg win should really almost kill a tie off, because teams knew how to kind of deal with that or weren't up against such frightening firepower. But it seems to be the story and would continue for the rest of the decade, really up to the point of recording, where that's nowhere near enough. Sometimes these second legs are turned around, and that's how it played out.
Far more regularly than yes, as you or I were growing up, where, as you say, 2-0 down from the first leg, you could pretty much expect your European run to end. And this is still
But you
an era
haven't got an away goal.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say. This is still the era of away goals. So if you like, the textbook way of doing it is you win your home game 2-0 and you go over there and add a goal, get one, and they're pretty much out. But aura is a big thing, and Barcelona still understandably have it. Jumping ahead, and spoiler alert, the semi-final I found truly shocking with Barcelona, but looking back, maybe the first leg was an indication that I shouldn't have been quite so shocked. It's a very sluggish Barca performance that night, and against, as Adam said, a decent Milan team, no more than that, but they wilt completely at the Camp Nou. They are not at the races early on. it's a case of Barca are going to come at you. And maybe it is the old cliche, Martin, of you have to get through that early stage to build some sort of confidence, especially when you look a little overawed, which they did, and in the end they were dispatched with really a minimum of fuss. And again, the most frustrating thing for Milan was the feeling that they didn't really participate in that second leg, that it wouldn't have mattered what they did because they lost an early goal and it just totally drained. But to the bigger point, you're absolutely correct. Now, once it happens, then teams begin to think that it's not impossible. I mean, I mentioned there, when we were growing up, you felt it was all but impossible if you didn't have at least one away goal. The old thing was, remember, you were better losing 3-1 than 2-0, and you were. But this has changed now. As you say, the firepower is such, and I think at the same time, the advances in attacking through this period, the advances in defending has not kept up with that. And this can be the result. But Barca at home never looked like a side who had any doubt that they were going to overcome this. And unfortunately, Milan never looked like a side who had any doubt that Barcelona were going to do that too.
Yeah, indeed. The other one that two of the most famous names, possibly the two most famous names in world football, Manchester United and Real Madrid, again at very different stages of fitness. We weren't to know this at this time, David, but this
No, we weren't.
was Sir Alex Ferguson's final Champions League campaign, indeed his final Champions League matches. And with the Cristiano Ronaldo return, and indeed it was a return in the second leg, but for 3/4 of the overall tie, United are punching higher than maybe some would have expected. Danny Welbeck put them ahead. Of course, you know who gets things back in gear, but they're ahead in Manchester just after the second half started. And then a red card seems to change the game, and Ferguson furious as he departs because Real Madrid would find two quick goals, one from Modrić and an apologetic one from Cristiano to seal it. But it was a very angry end to a Champions League career that's had its fair share of fucking disgrace about it.
In a way, there were only two ways I think Alex Ferguson's Champions League career deserved to come to an end. One was by winning it, and the other was by going out to Real Madrid in controversial fashion. And I think that this one was obviously not the one he would have chosen, but for us on a show like this, lovers of narrative, it provided it. They're pretty good in the first leg. It's a very mature performance, I think, from Manchester United away from home. They take the lead through. I have a friend who's a Brighton supporter who every year sends me a text that has the list of Ballon d'Or contenders with one taken out and Welbeck quietly put in there, as far as he's concerned. Maybe a player that never quite reached his potential, do we think? Because
injury, blah blah blah.
Injury, yeah. Because he was a very, very fine player. But United are chuntering along pretty nicely here, and then the Nani red card comes. And sometimes you can use that to fuel a certain passion within the ground. Sometimes nerves can seize the stadium. And one of the things that's actually, we'll need to ask Rob about this the next time we have him on. One of the things that I've noticed throughout this whole history of the Champions League, Martin, is Manchester United's ground, Old Trafford, can be phenomenal, but it can really, nerves can grab it. And in those periods, the better teams take advantage of it. And this is what happens. United, they lose their head on the field a little bit, I think. And then after that
these things
initial...
happen, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But they lose their head in that period. And of course, when you're up against serial winners, with the quality, obviously, that Real Madrid have, they don't panic. They don't start trying to force it. They just go, right, okay, and adapt. And as you mentioned there, 2 quick goals and the tie's done. I think United can count themselves unfortunate. I don't think they respond well at all to the red card. So they are culpable in a way, because I don't think that you need to frame that anger in a positive way. You've got to channel it. They didn't channel it. They were all over the place. Suddenly they were ragged as all hell. And of course, it's somehow even more fitting that the guy who takes advantage of that is Luka Modrić, because he's not going to get caught up in anything like that. He gets the goal, which I think at the time it was commented on. He had been a target for United, hadn't he?
Well,
Not
so
long
many
before,
are, I guess.
that end up there. So it's almost painfully apt that he does that, and then it had to be. I mean, I watch the commentary back, folks, or watch the highlights. The commentator says it had to be, and it did. A guy who writes his own scripts at this point. But I think United could feel a little aggrieved at the fact that they had been very, very good for 3/4 of this tie. But sometimes it's not about how you start, it's how you finish. And in that period, in that 15 minutes where they lose their head, ruthlessly efficient Real Madrid take advantage of it. And United, of course, at the end, heroic piling forward style. But Madrid see it out, and as you say, Ferguson at the end, his least favourite club in the whole world. Although, as we've mentioned before, I think at heart one of his favourite clubs in the whole world, and that's been the whole point of it. But they get the job done, and he was properly purple in his post-match interview.
I don't know what you guys think, but I'm not sure it's a scandalous decision. Like,
I don't either. No,
I'm not sure it's not a red card. But I think, I don't know what it was afterwards, but he sent Mike Phelan out to do some media, didn't he? I assume that was the press conference stuff, and that's the first time he'd ever done that. I think they weren't the aggressor in the tie, as you would expect, because it's not a good Man United team at all. I think you see this even in this leg at Old Trafford, when they get the goal up, they're content just to sit there. They're not going to be what they were 10, 15 years ago and go and try and get the second.
That was a style, though. Now, Ferguson had learned from the gung-ho, and to be fair, it served them well the last few seasons. But then, ironically, when we're saying they were nice and calm and, just we know what we need to do, they just lose their head for quarter of an hour. And suddenly passes aren't finding their mark, and people aren't tracking runners. You can't do that against quality like that.
Do you know what's really interesting as well? That 15 minutes that they lose their head, there's the 15 minutes from Real Madrid. So Nani gets sent off, 56th minute. 3 minutes later, Luka Modrić on for Alvaro Arbeloa. So
yeah,
Mourinho's like, hang on a minute. 7 minutes later, Modrić scores. 3 minutes later, Ronaldo scores. 2 minutes later, Pepe on for Ozil. Pretty much. That's us done, lads. 15 minutes up the road. See you later.
15-minute match. Yeah. There are a few interesting things about this game. You're absolutely right. It's not a scandalous decision. Ferguson probably made more of it. He was one for that.
Like projecting you.
Yeah. I think you're right, David, about Real Madrid. I think it's fair to say that Sir Alex Ferguson maybe has a complicated love-hate relationship with clubs that he loved as a growing up, and as his career developed. Putting Phelan out, he must have known, Adam, that this was it. The world didn't.
Yeah,
but I think he must have known that this was at least likely, possibly, to be his last. It's not a great United side, but it's a side that will be league champions and league champions comfortably, which probably says a lot about where English football is perhaps at this juncture. David mentioned, Adam, that we should have maybe seen signs of what awaited Barcelona in the semi-finals, maybe signs of what awaited Real Madrid, because this was not particularly impressive. They get the job. You're absolutely right. A 15-minute cup game. He sees the opportunity, pounces, and he makes it happen. But they're not brilliant. Both Spanish sides will get a fair kicking. next week when we come to the semi-finals. But you and I spoke in great depth about the previous year's semi-final and how, if there is a hinge moment in Mourinho's career, it probably is that, actually. That if they'd won that, he's probably fated as being the greatest manager ever. 3 Champions Leagues with 3 different clubs, and winning the league in style, so you can't use the bus criticism overlay and all the rest of it. It just seems a bit tired here, and this would be his end as well this season.
I think, take the words out of my mouth. Both managers running their race in this respective era that they have. They finish a distant second behind Barcelona. They will finish third the year after, of course, not under Mourinho. But I think Madrid have better players for sure. I don't think there's any doubt there. But they certainly didn't play like Real Madrid over the course of this. They'd still been scoring a lot of goals. I think they got over 100 again in the league this year. We know about the points tally the year before. But I think, as we've spoken about, people just get sick listening to Mourinho. I think really it's just the same thing over and over again. And this person hates you and this person hates you, and playing off each other. I think certainly when you get to this level and with player power, how it is now, I think at this stage, you could argue the decade before we spoke about was sort of super owners and all that sort of stuff. I think we're now getting fully to that player power stage where they're like, I really not need. Do I need to listen to this nonsense? I'm going to be here longer than you. All that jazz that we see at Chelsea as well. I think just big clubs just aren't. There's not many big fiery characters at these big clubs 10 years on, as we've said, and I think it's maybe just that thing that's just these habits are dying out. But I completely agree. I think can't really complain that Madrid go through here at all. Ferguson, fair enough, is just going to project that rage and how absolutely disastrous this was, and the game hinges on this. And he might be right, the game does hinge on the red card, absolutely, because it gives Madrid the incentive, but it doesn't make it not a red card for me. So I kind of gets a bit confused.
Yeah, deliberately so, perhaps. I'll stick with you, Adam, because this is just almost a fixed script for Arsenal. Don't do the business in the group stage. End up with a massive and very difficult team in the round of 16 in Bayern Munich. Shit the bed in the first leg. This time at home, they lose 3-1 to Bayern. 2-0 down after just 20 minutes or whatever. Did pull one back, but then get Mandzukic nipped one near the end as well. And then get a great start in Munich. I think Giroud scores after a couple of minutes. It takes them ages, but they do get a second. Draw, but go out on away goals. I don't know what it is. Pressure off. They start to play when things are level. They just do not believe they are in the class of Bayern, or was Milan the year before, wasn't it? And it just continues to haunt them.
It does. I guess they just aren't in the class as well. It's maybe like the Milan example we spoke about at the start of this show. These fine margins, if you're always falling on that side of the fine margins, then it's because you've not done enough, I think, to fall on the other side consistently. You can talk about Man United and how that could have went either way, but 50-50 on the red card. I don't think Arsenal are even in that situation. I think they're constantly falling on the wrong side of it. And for me, that's everything we spoke about from 5 or 6 years before that shift, financial or otherwise, shift to accepting not even being second best, but accepting being third best or fourth at a push. And probably you could say again on this one, that could have went either way. I think Bayern Munich played really badly there. Maybe they just thought Arsenal aren't going to score 3 goals against us. We really don't need to bother, and they got away with it in the end. But I think as you see, as it goes through, they certainly take other teams a little bit more seriously, shall we say, as we get into the end stages. But I think you could say, okay, first leg collapse and then pressure's off, like you said. They've done really well. Have they done well, or is it just nobody expects anything? Let's go out and win, and ultimately still fail. But I just think the power of Bayern, if Arsenal had got another goal earlier than that, I think Bayern would have turned it on a little bit and scored.
Yes,
But it's easy to say in hindsight.
David, Celtic had a huge night, of course, against Barcelona, and they were drawing against Juventus in the knockout first leg at home. All the talk about how noisy it's going to be, how intimidating it's going to be, and how that home support can kind of carry them to another famous win. Lasted 3 minutes as Alessandro Matri put Juve 1 up, and a couple of late goals finished the tie there, and then 2 more in Turin for good measure, and a fairly comfortable 5-0 defeat.
Yes, although not without its controversy with
Surely
Celtic.
not.
Yeah, I was as stunned as you were. Celtic being quite upset by what they felt was illegal holding in the box that was not rewarded with a penalty. They have a case. It was Lichtsteiner, the Swiss defender, and he was very grabby, to be fair. But that wasn't why they lost this game. They lost this game because they were beaten by a considerably better side, and the 2 legs goes on to prove that. It did lead to the amusing one situation afterwards, and conclusive proof why managers should not be on social media when a mischief-making Rangers supporter told Neil Lennon that the referee for the 3-0 defeat, his son, was in the Juventus youth system. And Neil Lennon replied, "Have you got proof of this?" Exclamation mark, question mark, exclamation mark. To which the chap then responded in a triumphant, derogatory manner to him. So yeah, managers should not go on social media immediately after a football match. But yeah, look, they had done tremendously well to get there, as much as it would pain me to say it as a Rangers supporter, but the gap was huge, and it was ruthlessly exposed. And I know we've mentioned before that a big defeat in the first leg doesn't automatically mean you're out. It did here, and I think most people knew that. And in the second leg, Juventus play well within themselves, take a 2-0 comfortably through, but success for a Scottish team, even by this stage, is getting into it, but then to get out of it is realistically as far as you can go, because unless you get an incredibly favourable draw, and there aren't that many to get, so the odds are against it, you are going to come up against a side who are considerably better than you. That's just the reality of the situation, and this is what happened. And 5-0 was not an unfair reflection of the 2 matches.
No, it wasn't. Another club, Davy, who knocked 5 in over 2 legs was Borussia Dortmund. They were away to Donetsk for the first leg, 2-2. Again, kind of professional job done away from home, and then a very textbook professional demolition at home, 2 up at half time, game all done, and moving on with a lot of verve.
Well, you know how Adam is a dork, right? I am from another
dork.
tribe. A lovable, very much so, but I am a geek, right? And although we are in the same multiverse, we are of different tribes. Yeah, if you will, yes. I'm Superman, he's Supergirl. And we disagree slightly on, for example, our views on German football. I don't particularly care for hipster's choice Borussia Dortmund. I think that they get tossed off by football hipsters for winning a corner in an attacking sense, and I like Bayern Munich's evil big dogness. But even I was starting to think with this Dortmund team, this is the real deal here. This is something worth watching, and again, it will all come to spectacular fruition the following season. I think you nailed it there, and this is not always a thing we can associate with Dortmund, is it? Cold professionalism. A highly emotive club, and a club that sometimes often falls short because of that, to get themselves into positions and then to not be able to see it through. But again, really solid performance. Getting the 2 away goals puts you in a spectacular position. Tough tie as well, but they were very, very good, and you could see that this was actually something different and special at this point. And I'll turn it over to my cousin here to to get into just what was making them look so special this season.
We'll maybe go into it a bit next week, Adam, but
I think, do you know, actually, when David was talking about the emotive part of it there, I totally agree. And I think when you think about, I haven't really thought about it until now, but the manager symbolises that, I think, as well. Obviously, we know a lot more about him now, and when you think about it, there's probably, you couldn't pick for better or worse, two better clubs for him to be manager of, because they feel like a really good fit in terms of how emotive they are, how, I guess, down on the luck they were until, in relative terms, until he appeared, and then obviously how emotive he is and how the fact he can pull it all together. So it's not something I had considered before. But yeah, I think the final was the sort of poster boy, if you like, or the sort of crowning moment of that sort of gegenpressing piece that we can dig into in detail. And there's some really interesting things in that final. I think we said earlier as well, didn't we? It's rare, certainly it's immensely rare for German football to have two teams going at it at the top of the league that are in fine fettle. It tends to be if Bayern had an off year, then somebody would win it, an off couple of years, vice versa. But the fact that this is, like I've said before, a really, really nice to watch Bayern team going up against this makes it all the more fascinating. So yeah, I'm looking forward to digging into that.
We'll come back to them in this show, Dortmund, and how maybe the emotive harem scarum seat the pants stuff is not quite done with yet. Paris Saint-Germain, Adam, this show always rejigs my memory, and you expect it to when you're going through the 1990s and noughties. But it wasn't until doing a bit of work and watching a few games for these recordings. So, Carlo Ancelotti was manager of PSG for a year and a half. He'll move to Real Madrid, obviously, at the end of this season. And possibly no surprise then that they're starting under his reign. They brought some big players in. We talked about that, I think, a couple of weeks ago. But they're moving. They're moving out the groups, and now they're moving to the quarterfinals against Valencia. Always a tricky knockout game unless you're Real Madrid in the Champions League. 2-1 win in Spain. They were 2 up before half time. Valencia did get a lifeline, and indeed got back kind of level on the. They only got the one away goal, but they were back in action in Paris. But Lavezzi got the all important equaliser. But just managed quite well and steady as you go, moving through to what will be a very interesting quarter.
Yeah, very, very Ancelotti. I think you would kind of sum it up. They've obviously now embedded themselves, I guess, and certainly heavily embedded themselves in League One, and they're now trying their very best to make an impact on this stage. Obviously, it doesn't happen for over a decade now, as we know at the time of recording. They've eventually managed to get there. So yeah, I think this is a very intriguing set of games. Like, it's one of these ones you look at and you think, oh, it's just kind of run of the mill. But I think for some of the reasons that you mentioned there, the fact that Rami scores that goal for Valencia in the Mestalla to keep the tie alive. Ibrahimovic gets sent off as well in stoppage time, I think, just before the goal or just after the goal. It sort of then puts that onus back on Paris Saint-Germain, because at 2-0 you're like, okay, it's done. They're going back to Paris and they're going to boss it. But it just sort of puts the onus back on them, and then albeit, like you said, being level on still winning on away goals, the fact that Valencia have pegged them back just after half time, you're like, oh God. So yeah, I think it was quite an intriguing couple of games. Ernesto Valverde as well, who's by no means a dummy, was the Valencia manager at this point. So a bit of intrigue in terms of the tactics of it all. As well, Valencia had a pretty decent team at this point. I really liked, again, not a name that gets a lot of plaudits, but PSG, I really liked the goalkeeper at this time. Salvatore Sirigu was a name that I'd forgotten about for a while. Just like not flashy at all. I can't think who I would compare him to, but just not flashy at all, but just was a solid keeper Not anywhere near the levels of being one of the best in Europe, but just one of those dependable players that when you are a team like this who probably don't need to defend too much, having someone there who will be able to do it for a number of years, I think is good. On the other side as well, Vicente Guaita was at Valencia as well at this point. I think he went to Palace, didn't he? Later on, and he was another one I thought just nice, dependable goalkeeper that you really need as part of these teams. So yeah, I thought it was more intriguing than you might think, given that PSG go through and you think, oh, fair enough, it was a bit closer and there was a bit of controversy, I guess, at the end of the first leg as well.
Stick with you, Aaron, because Porto look like they've done the job against Malaga. They've won the home leg, 1-0, no away goal, everything kind of ticked off. Would have liked a second, probably needed a second, because Isco and Pals did a number, and this Malaga story continues 2-0, and they move through to what will be kind of heartbreaking but dramatic quarterfinal.
Yeah, I think heartbreaking and dramatic is how I would call it. It's potentially, well, it is unfortunate, I guess, if when we come on to it. But yeah, I think Porto, not really much to say about Porto at this stage. They still, like we said, they're now in this talent building rather than team building phase. I think really good Malaga team that we touched on before with Pellegrini, just functional, just knows how to set up a team, has decent players, very decent players as far as Malaga are concerned in the positions, and I think this one probably would have been a bit of a coin toss, albeit maybe Isco and Santa Cruz just provide that little bit at the end. But yeah, I think in my head I had that as a Porto win, and then we go through it for them to go through and face Dortmund in the next round. But Malaga clearly had other ideas.
Sure did. And Davey, to round us off, Galatasaray behind the 8 ball after that first leg against Schalke, 1-1 there, and 1 down in Germany. But they respond, they're 2-1 up by half time. Michel Bastos brings it back level, but they hold the cards and then make sure with an injury time goal. Again, a slight surprise that Galatasaray going through. How is this done? Is it experienced campaigners like Drogba and Sneijder, Buiz, I think, as well, plus the best of Turkish talent? Is that basically just the formula here?
I think so, and you're up against a side who have some European experience at this level, but not a great deal of it. I will admit to have been surprised back in the day when this result happened, because I, like you, I suspect thought 1-1 perfect, get them back to the Schalke's home stadium. 90,000 people there, phenomenal backing. And when they went a goal up, I thought, here we go, that's sort of what we expected. But a tremendous fight back before half time. And this is, for those who do miss away goals, Martin, this is the kind of thing they miss in it, the way that it can totally change, because when they go 2-1 down, they need 2. And that pressures. I really like Bastos. I think he's, as we've discussed on this show, that we are able to go through and find players who are maybe not quite as celebrated long term in the UK, but I always thought he was a terrific footballer, and he gets them back in it, but they still need one, and they are piling on for it. And of course, what happens, 95th minute, they get done on the break, but they would have been going out anyway. Whereas, of course, as we know now, it would go to extra time, which I do think is fairer. And I think, on balance, I prefer the away goals rule simply to be gone, simply because although you would get situations like this, you would also get games that were killed after 10 minutes of a second leg because of an away goal. So I think this prevents it, and it is fairer. But yeah, again, I'm going to go back to one of your points that you've made regularly, which is having the guy, or in this case, 2 or 3 in your side. If you are, and there is some good Turkish talent in this side. This is a good group, a good generation of Turkish players. But we've seen in the past that they have a ceiling in European competition. But you've got Drogba there, who has won the thing the previous season. You've got Sneijder there, who's won it 3 years before. and they provide a sort of calmness for the rest of the side, this very talented youth structure. And again, it's about taking advantage. When they get the equaliser, we spoke about Manchester United losing their heads. Manchester United was a more obvious one. It was done because of anger, a disciplinary issue. This is not. This is panic, and it's taking advantage of that panic. And when a side loses 2 goals like this in quick succession, when they've been motoring along quite nicely up to that point, it's because they've panicked, and it changes the game completely. In the second half, they do try to force it. And I suppose you could argue that it kind of works because they do get one back, although it's a very good goal. They Galatasaray, I think, are very, very comfortable in what they're doing and keeping them at bay, and the frustration's growing. And that's the other side of a huge crowd like that. It's great when they're roaring you on, but when they're palpably getting frustrated, you need to get a goal, you need to get a goal. And I urge people to go back and watch the third goal, because there's like 47 Schalke players and officials in the opposition 18-yard box. But I was surprised at this. But when you look at the names in that side, maybe I shouldn't have been.
And they were drawn against Real Madrid in the quarterfinals, and that's where that journey ended. This really is kind of textbook stuff. 3-0 at the Bernabeu. Ronaldo, Benzema and Higuain. Well, there you go. When you've got that kind of firepower, they'll turn up, and a very early Ronaldo goal in Turkey ended all that. Galatasaray did score 3 goals, but not the 5 or whatever they would need, and Cristiano popped up yet again in injury time to seal it. I don't think there's really much to talk about the football, but does anyone know why this game or the press conference before it is more well known now?
Is this the one where Mourinho had a go at Casillas?
Possibly, but that's not what I was asking for. It's more an image than content.
No, you've got me.
Think a meme, think an exasperated Jose Mourinho pulling.
Oh my goodness, is this the one?
Off. It's a Turkish
journalist.
Questions. Him and Varane are in that shot. But yeah, that's when he pulls those off his head
so often as well. And I mean, some of his antics and press conferences, even last season as we record this, 24-25, when a well-meaning, I'm sure, but overly verbose journalist continues a question for, to be fair, what did seem like an eon, and Mourinho pretends to fall asleep. He's always been box office. I knew Adam wouldn't know, though, because, as you know, he deliberately excises anything to do with Jose Mourinho from his mind seconds later, because he won't give it house room.
But that's where it comes from. And let's get into Paris Saint-Germain, Barcelona then, Adam, because this is fun. This is a lot of fun. 2-2 in Paris. Barcelona wearing that hideous ice lolly away strip. Messi puts them 1-up. A Zlatan equaliser with 11 minutes to go. Watching this back in a VAR era that we're in, you're just like, no, sorry, that's offside. Like, why wasn't that brought back? Why? Zlatan is miles offside, and there are a few in the latter stages of this Champions League that just simply wouldn't happen. But Barcelona get a penalty with a minute to go. Xavi gets brought down and he converts it himself. But Matuidi scores a very, very late equaliser. So 2-2, Barcelona hold the cards, but Messi's injured or unfit, not fully fit for the return. He's on the bench, and Pastore puts Paris Saint-Germain ahead just after the break, and they are well worth the lead, I think, on the night. They were very, very good that evening. They're 1-up. It appears, Adam, that Messi just decides he's coming on because he just kind of gets up and starts to warm up and making it very clear, no, I'll give you 35 minutes or whatever it is to come on and kind of do the biz. And he does make inroads. He Paris Saint-Germain quite clearly are retreating, and he is involved in the equaliser scored by Pedro, I think, in the end. That is enough, just enough for Barcelona to go through. But very entertaining tie, not for the last time between these two.
No, definitely not. And yeah, I think there's obviously, I don't really remember it being I can't remember any of the quotes at the time, but Ibrahimovic playing against Barcelona is always box office, because I'm sure he's always had something to say after his time being there. I can't remember too much around this one, but I think it's a fine margin again. Like we said, there's a lot in here, apart from Bayern Munich, but there's a lot of last minute winners and more in these quarterfinals. They are cagey, and a couple of goals either way, and you're looking at Málaga, Galatasaray being into the semi-finals, which would have been really interesting to see. I know we've seen it famously, I guess, the 2004 one, wasn't it? There was a bit of a surprise in those, but yeah, I think. I don't know what happened with Messi, because he's injured. Like he is injured. There's no getting away from it. Obviously left on the bench. Maybe it is just like you said. Oh, give me 20 minutes now. I'll go on and score like some sort of NFL kicker. Yeah, it was. I'm loath to say anything as harsh on Paris Saint-Germain as you know, because I'm not really a big fan of it. But yeah, I guess get the job done. The first leg for me was the most interesting, though. I think that 3 goals in the last 10 minutes or so of it sets it up nicely. Especially when it's Ibrahimovic that scores, then there's a penalty in the last minute. You think, okay, Barcelona get the 2-1, but then Blaise Matuidi, who's a player that I liked. I think he really sort of sums up this new type of midfielder that I think is coming to the fore. As we've mentioned, we've not really done a huge amount on tactics, I guess, in the last, I don't know how many shows, last 7 or so seasons, kind of because it's got a little bit homogenous, kind of because it is just 4-2-3-1s everywhere for the most part. But now we're sort of starting to see the wingers come back into play, Robin and Ribery that we've mentioned for Bayern Munich, but we're sort of starting to see this next generation of midfielders coming as well, who I think wrongly, but for rightly or wrongly, are just sort of are all physical, and they just exist to be the platform. That's not something that I'm a big fan of at all. But I think you're starting to see this, and probably Matuidi is one of those guys. He probably would have been a centre half. I think at times, because he's a big physical guy, and they've got him playing that sort of box to box role. But at the same time, I did really like him, so I think he's an interesting one to pick out, because again, mentioned Sirigu, maybe similar to guys like Makalele or players like that 10 years before. There's some unsung heroes in these teams that maybe don't get the credit, but I think they play an important tactical role. And I think Matuidi, for getting Paris Saint-Germain up the park, was pretty underrated, I think, for this team. So it's good to see him getting a goal. But ultimately, I think when Messi comes on, the game changes for better or worse in the second leg, and Barcelona go through.
And the game doesn't change when PSG fling David Beckham on with 7 minutes to go. But yeah, the Barcelona move. But yeah, a nasty surprise is awaiting. That nasty surprise, David, is delivered by Bayern Munich. Again, another heavyweight on paper contest in the quarterfinals between Bayern and Juve. I mean, Alaba has Bayern up within a minute of that first leg in Munich. They won both 2-0. 4 different goal scorers. It just, I don't know if I think Adam and I maybe discussed it. To lose that final the way they did at home and the heartbreak, so many other clubs would take a year off to deal with that pain. I can't think of a club more suited to saying, well, we were very close and we'll do it next year. Let's go.
100%. There are very few clubs in world football who could recover from something like that. You really do have to be an elite big dog, where it's not we came so close, it's, well, we didn't do it, so we need to go and right that. And you know that success breeds that mentality. But I agree with you. I think there's maybe 4 or 5 clubs in world football who would have been capable of that. This is ruthlessly efficient. A goal in the very first minute of the tie and a goal in the very last minute of the tie, bookending 2 other strikes. And I have to say, I thought that Mario Mandzukic was absolutely terrific in this match. And so did Juventus, because, of course, he then becomes a long-term target for them, and they end up getting him not that long later. A supremely underrated player, I think, Mandzukic. That wonderful talent of making players around him better, and that wonderful talent of being a vital cog in a smooth machine. He could be a little unruly in his play at times. He could be, he wasn't quite as smooth. To a term beloved of Adam and I, he wasn't a glider round that park. He was a handful, if I'm going to my football cliches book. He was a handful for defenders. But his game intelligence, because he wasn't the quickest, Mandzukic, but his positional sense, his game intelligence, and something I know you're hot on, Martin, his decision making.
Yeah.
And at no point over the 180 minutes of this tie do you feel Juventus are going to go through it. And of course, the early opening goal kind of makes that obviously more more obvious. But they just have a complete confidence in them. I was super impressed by this because, as has become clear throughout these, I still have Serie A leanings, despite, and I was kind of still in a fair old bit of denial at this point about Serie A's status in the world. I've learned in the subsequent decade to be more realistic. But this is a good Juventus side, and they get pushed away. And somehow, this is going to sound strange, right? Somehow doing it that way can be as impressive as that they went out and swept them away 5 or 6-0, because this was saying this is not them at their best. This is not them firing in all cylinders. They do have nights like that where they'll put 6 by. They're capable of that, but their base level is this. It's so high. That's their base level that they can just go and very comfortably knock out a very good side. And an expectant club, especially at this point, an expectant club, with history. I thought this was a super impressive performance, I have to say. Because of the tie you're about to mention, I did think that there was a German side who had their name on it, and it wasn't them. But the pragmatism, the cold, efficient dispatching of a serious rival, I was super impressed by it.
Just to touch on that, mental strength again, and this is the flip side of mental strength, go to next year's World Cup, and for Germany to beat Brazil 7-1 in the most remarkable international game I think I've ever seen in terms of the outcome, the size. I know other countries that are not too far from where we're recording, perhaps, that if they had recorded a result like that, there's no way they'd be able to function for a final in a few days, because it would just be too huge, too much of an achievement. And it's like, okay, that was great, but we've got a harder task on Sunday, and just being able to completely refocus and go again.
That's it. You're absolutely spot on. And look, at the risk of going into easy stereotyping, there is this ruthless pragmatism at the heart of what they did, as there is in that match. And I agree with you. It's the most. I would go further and say it's the most remarkable football match I've ever seen, because very rarely, how tabloid journalists love the phrase "shocking" to describe football scenes. Well, very rarely does it leave me shocked. I was sitting watching that mouth agape, and a big part of that is the who doesn't, after 3-0 up in 20 minutes against Brazil in Brazil in a World Cup semi, pinch themselves and go, "Oh my goodness, lads," and sit back and take a few minutes to gather their thoughts? Germany don't, and they score 6 in this period, and it was like watching it was like watching a hitman very ruthlessly dispatch someone. But you're absolutely right. It is that brilliant focus that you don't get at many international teams, many clubs, where it is very much, right, we've done this, it is over, tomorrow is a new day. And I think it's because the standard is, as it always is for Bayern, the standard is you have to win this. That's what's expected. That's not what we hope. That's not you have to win this. We will be incredibly disappointed if you don't. There's a big under 19s tournament in Germany, in Stuttgart every year, an indoor football tournament. And I went along to it for a couple of years, and Bayern sent a team one year. It's clubs from all over Europe, and it's like a revolving cast. And the Bayern players, their fans were raging when they got knocked out. And I mean, like, livid and throwing things at these kids, right? And they're all walking shamefaced, and their coach came to do interviews, and he's like, I thought that performance was a disgrace. Things will have to change. We're going to have words. And I spoke to a German colleague from Stuttgart and said, look, guys, it's a under-19s indoor kickabout. It doesn't matter. It's Bayern. They have to win it. If they don't win it, it's considered a total failure. He said if they entered into, a five-a-side out the back with other coaches, they'd expect their coaches to win it. It's just who they are. And when they're at their best, this is what they're like. Sorry, Imperious, you are not in our way. You are something we have to go through to get where we're going, rather than an achievement in itself. And this whole run is that, I think.
Adam, let's wrap up the quarterfinals with the most dramatic, the most sensational of all, Málaga versus Dortmund. Didn't look like that after the first leg, 0-0. Not a lot of 0-0s popping up the longer we do this particular show. And Dortmund in a bit of trouble. Joaquin had put Málaga ahead. Lewandowski, who is going to fill his boots soon, equalised before half-time. Okay, fine. Slightly behind because of away goals. And then, with 8 minutes to go, very behind because Málaga have taken a lead and you're into the closing stage of the game. 90 minutes ticks over and Dortmund still need 2 goals and somehow they get them. And there are 2 ways of looking at that, and we've kind of mentioned them both. David's talking about naming the cup. You do feel you're going places, you've got momentum. We don't know when we're done. But also this kind of harem-scarum, chaotic way of playing football, that's not sustainable. So there's a bit of both in this. And heartbreak for Málaga, who are the minnows in this kind of quarterfinal lineup for sure.
Yeah, I've tried to watch a Dortmund game from each of these next 3 rounds, just to sort of get a flavour of it. I think the thing that sticks out to me about this one is we spoke about gegenpressing last week. We'll probably do a bit more on it next week. But one of the key fundamentals of it is counter-pressing, I guess, and winning the ball back against the opposition. So what Pellegrini did, which makes perfect sense now, but I don't think many people had been doing it at the time, was he set up in his usual 4-4-2, but they just didn't press at all. So they didn't even try to build. They just went long and wide and sort of bypassed the press. So there was no opportunity really for Tulalan, players like that. Camacho, I think, was playing in central midfield as well. There wasn't really any option for them to lose the ball in dangerous areas and basically let Dortmund do what they wanted to do. So Klopp being Klopp got sort of visibly frustrated at that, I think. So again, you can talk about chaos and pressing and intensity and never say die and all that sort of stuff. I think all of that certainly happened towards the end, but I don't think it's any great tactical shift in this game particularly. I don't think you could look at it and say gegenpressing won this game. I think name on the cup, whatever. I mean, that last goal was absolutely zero to do with tactics. Felipe Santana has no idea where he is. Even Mario Royce's goal as well. And to be honest, the defending for Elisu's Malaga goal as well is an absolute car crash. So I don't think what we've seen here was gegenpressing at its peak. I think we might see it later on, certainly. But this one I think was just fortune, luck, incentive, chaos, whatever you want to call it. So I thought that was quite an interesting thought, I guess, on it. And I think in this game, players that we maybe haven't spoken about for a while were quite interesting. Gundogan, who most people probably will remember being there, very influential for them. Didn't have a good game at all. Again, Málaga didn't quite they didn't quite do what Gundogan wanted them to do. He wanted to play close to Mario Götze, try and get forward. Maybe not quite the box to box guy that he would kind of go on to be at Man City. Maybe more of a sort of holding midfielder, if you like, with license to go forward. But they just wouldn't let him. They wouldn't let him break through. They wouldn't let them play those triangles. They just wouldn't let them do anything. I think it was only until Nuri Sahin comes on, again, another player that I certainly think is emblematic of this, probably one of the most important in this. It was only really until he came on and he was sort of starting to play the passes through rather than pressing, where you've got Kuba and you've got even Mario Götze and you've got Schmelzer and Piszczek, those guys who are going to press and harass and be fit and make you lose the ball. It was only really until they got Nuri Sahin on there who was like, actually, I'll just try and ping balls through myself, getting Mario Royce on the end of it. It was only really then that they started to get a little bit of joy. So yeah, this one maybe not, like I said, not a defining moment. I don't think it defined gegenpressing at all. Maybe it defined the manager and his personality and that sort of chaos that is around him for better or worse. But yeah, unlucky for Malaga because they very almost did what they set out to do.
That'll do us for the games. Just one last point before we wrap up this week. Davey mentioned about Serie A's demise. The first time since 1995-96, there's not an English team in the quarterfinals of the Champions League. What does that say, David? A little bit of a freak, because it's going to be a wee while before there's a winner. They will be back in those semi-finals next season, but possibly just a hint that because that's some run. I think 2010 is the only year between 2005 and 2012 where there's not an English club in the final, and quite often you had 3 semi-finals in that run as well.
It's the bite back of the continental biggies, Barcelona, Real Madrid, Bayern, the sides that now we, I think, sort of look at the start of a season and say it will be an English club or one of them. PSG, of course, now added to that list, but it is very much a sticking post on that. And to be fair to English clubs, this is the kind of thing that does get discussed quickly, Martin. It is highlighted in their media then, and there is generally a sort of refocus on it. But, we mentioned where they are at this point. Man United, as we know, yes, they're going to win the title, but there are problems underneath the surface of that iceberg. Arsenal, perennial European Champions League underachievers. It's a fact. It's been, I hope, aptly argued on this show. City not quite up where they will become. Chelsea still in, one of their kind of odd, the reigning champions, but still in a bit of a transitional moment, which they were fine with. They would do that every year or so. And Liverpool, as Adam touched upon earlier, nowhere near it. And those are your English threats in the Champions League stage. But I do remember it being noted, and I will say that for English clubs, but equally with the financial advantages available to English clubs, they always should be. You mentioned their semi-finals. I think that absolutely should be England should have one club in there, especially. But I do think that this is a very strong period. We're tail end of one of the greatest sides ever in Barcelona, but they're by no means duds. Real Madrid have spent a lot of money and are sort of chuntering around, and this is the finest Bayern team of this century, maybe.
Yeah.
I think that's a fair shout.
I mean, you get Chelsea, who'll be in the semi next season. Then you have another season without any English quarterfinals. Then you've got the next season where a Man City that are still miles away, really, from this, get to the quarterfinal, but no further. Then Leicester get to the quarterfinal and no further. And then you start seeing Liverpool in finals, and then they're going to win, and Chelsea and City, and we're kind of back into that groove again. But it probably is a bit telling that certainly the kind of concentration that we've just come through for best part of 10 seasons is over.
But I think that's the wider European shift as well. At this stage, England is not the place that you come to, or these clubs are not the place that you come to for tactical innovation. The coaches aren't there at this point as well. I think they're still broadly on the continent, for better or worse. I think you start to see with Klopp and Guardiola and Conte coming, you start to think, okay, most of the best coaches in Europe are in England, but it's a few years away, so it's maybe not a surprise that I know you mentioned there's going to be some teams that will come in, but David mentioned Man United are fizzling out, Man City still trying to build at this point, Arsenal nowhere near, Liverpool nowhere near, Chelsea delighted that they won it, but nowhere near after. So I don't think it's a big surprise. I think it's then that tactical shift coming, because it's too close to Barcelona for teams to start to play like Barcelona, if that makes sense. They're still, this is basically the last season of still going through it, even though Guardiola isn't there. So the copycats aren't really there at this minute. Gegenpress is just sort of hitting its peak, so it'll be another couple of years before every team is trying to either press or play tiki-taka. So it's maybe just a sort of European shift. They're in a little bit of a lull between the two phases, waiting for the adoption to come, and in England's case, waiting for the managers or the coaches to come and bring that influence, bring the players that can play their styles, all sorts of stuff. And I don't think there's any coincidence that you see that summer when Guardiola and Klopp appear, that next wave of tactics and success and all that sort of stuff comes. I think it's just one of those things, peaks and troughs.
And also the perennial issue that the giant clubs of the continent can basically play a lot of league games with their slippers on, and England have more teams of substance, shall we say, but it's far more competitive, far more physically demanding, no winter break, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, that'll do us, gentlemen. Fun as ever. Thank you, David.
A pleasure. I've enjoyed that one.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
And your full lecture on gegenpressing versus Bayern Munich will be available next week as the two sides head down Wembley way, but not before some fireworks in the semi-finals. Until then, bye for now. If you enjoyed the show and want to help us grow, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. On YouTube, search for And It's Live Podcast. We've got new deep dives, drafts and breakdowns dropping every other day.